The call comes through a number that doesn't exist by morning. That's the first thing you learn. Not tradecraft, not digital forensics. You learn that the people who need you most are also the people most terrified of needing anyone. The number is gone before you finish the conversation. The conversation itself never happened. You are already erasing before you've agreed to anything. You are 26 years old. You have a master's degree in computer forensics from a school you no longer mention. You have $11,000 in the bank, a studio apartment with a server rack where the couch should be, and a second-hand understanding of what wealthy people do when they're afraid. You learned that from your first employer, a boutique firm in Vienna. 3 people, no website, no LinkedIn, no physical signage on the door. They called themselves information hygienists. You called it cleaning. The word stuck. The first client is not a billionaire, not yet. He is a mid-level fund manager in Frankfurt who made a decision one night in a hotel room that was, it turned out, documented. Not by anyone with intent, just a camera that shouldn't have been connected to a network that shouldn't have been accessible. That's the thing about the digital world. It remembers without trying. It doesn't store things out of malice, it stores things because storage is cheaper than deletion, and nobody ever programs a system to forget. Your entire industry exists in that gap, the gap between what the system keeps and what the client can bear to have kept. You spend 11 days on that first job. You don't sleep more than 4 hours on any of them. You map the network path, trace the packet logs, identify the 3 nodes where the footage cached automatically. 2 are straightforward. 1 is a hospitality server in a data center outside Luxembourg managed by a company whose parent company is registered in Malta and whose actual operations are contracted to a firm in Bucharest. You spend 4 of those 11 days just building the org chart of who legally controls that server. Then you spend 2 more figuring out who actually does. Those are different people. They are always different people. You make a call. Not to the company, to a man whose number you were given by the man in Vienna who told you this is how it works. You don't ask the man's name, he doesn't offer it. You describe the server, you describe the node, you describe the cache path and the file format and the timestamp range. He says a number, you relay the number to your client wires the funds, the cache is wiped within 36 hours, you verify the deletion forensically, you submit your report, you invoice for your time separately, you never speak to the man again. That's the architecture. It doesn't simplify as you move up, it compounds. Within 2 years, you are doing this full-time, not for the firm in Vienna, for yourself. Word travels in the way that word travels in this world, which is to say it doesn't travel at all. It arrives. Someone who knows someone who was helped by someone who will never confirm it happened. A phone number passed on a card that has nothing else printed on it. A referral that comes through a lawyer who introduces you only as a specialist, and the client nods as if they understand what specialty means in this context, even though they don't, not yet. Your rate at 28 years old is $40,000 per engagement, flat, non-negotiable, half upfront, half on verified completion. The completion verification is something you designed yourself. You don't ask the client to trust you, you build them a proof set, a crawl of indexed content before and after, a forensic deletion certificate, a chain of custody document for any physical media destroyed. You give them something they can hold, even if holding it means they now possess documentation of the thing they were trying to erase. That's an irony you stop mentioning after the 3rd time a client looks at you like you've just told them a joke in a language they don't speak. The work sorts itself into categories quickly. You don't think of them formally, but they exist. The first category is reactive. Someone did something. It was captured. You make the capture disappear. This is the work most people imagine when they imagine your work. It is, in practice, the least interesting and most emotionally exhausting category. Because the thing that was captured is almost always real. You are not establishing innocence. You are not correcting a record. You are removing evidence of a fact. You learn to process that cleanly. You learn to treat it as a logistics problem. Because if you don't, you stop being good at the job. And if you stop being good at the job, the phone stops ringing. And the phone is all you have. The second category is proactive. The client is about to do something or has recently done something, and they want the environment sanitized before any documentation forms. This requires a different set of skills, less forensics, more architecture. You're not removing a file, you're designing a landscape in which certain files never formed to begin with. You advise on communication protocols, encrypted platforms with auto-delete, physical meeting preferences, how to structure a verbal instruction so that it cannot be construed as a written record, how to ensure that the person receiving the verbal instruction also understands they are not to create a written record. That's a softer skill set. You get better at it slowly, the way you get better at anything that requires reading people who are actively trying to not be read. The third category is the one nobody talks about even inside the work. You call it structural. It's not about a single event or a single decision. It's about a person. Their entire digital existence needs to be reshaped, not deleted. Deletion is detectable. Reshaped. The search results recalibrated. The article on page 1 of Google pushed to page 9 by a coordinated content architecture you commissioned through a network of legitimate-seeming publishing entities you have spent 3 years building and maintaining for exactly this purpose. You own 4 of them outright. They have staff, real staff, writers who think they work for a media holding company. They do, you just don't explain the full nature of the holding. That's the cost nobody discusses in the brochure that doesn't exist. It isn't the $40,000. It isn't the $200,000, which is what you charge for structural work. It's the infrastructure, the server capacity you lease under 7 different corporate identities to host the content that buries the content farms, the SEO contracts, the relationships with the editors of publications that are legitimate enough to rank but flexible enough to be useful, the attorney in Dublin who handles the incorporation, the attorney in Singapore who handles everything else. The monthly overhead of running a disappearance business is $180,000 before you take a single client call. That is not a number you share with anyone. It would answer too many questions about the scale of what you've built, and scale is its own kind of footprint. You are the thing you sell. You know this. You haven't decided yet what to do about it. By 34, you have handled 214 engagements. You track them in a system you built yourself, locally hosted, air-gapped, encrypted with a key that exists in 3 places: a physical document in a safe deposit box in Zurich, a memorized passphrase, and a hardware token you wear on your body every hour of every day, including in the shower, because there was 1 week 3 years ago where you thought about what would happen if you lost it, and you have not thought about anything else since. The entries in the system contain no names, no dates, no dollar amounts, just a code and a status. Green means closed, yellow means ongoing. There are no red entries. Red would mean a failure. There have been no failures. This is both your professional identity and, on certain nights, the thing that keeps you awake in a way that feels less like pride and more like pressure. The nature of the work changes at the level you're operating now. It changes because the clients change. You are no longer working for the fund manager in Frankfurt. You are working for the person who owns the fund that employed the fund manager. You are working for the person whose family has been in continuous relationship with a particular sovereign for 4 generations and who has recently had a private conversation with a senior official that, were it to become public, would not constitute a crime in any jurisdiction, but would constitute something worse than a crime in every jurisdiction: a story. You are hired to prevent the story, not the event. The event happened. The conversation occurred. The 2 men were in the same room on the same evening, and words passed between them that created an alignment of interests that is, technically, just a conversation between 2 private individuals. You are hired to ensure that the conversation remains exactly that, technically just a conversation, forever. This is the level at which you learn the first real rule of the work, not the rule they give you at the beginning, which is discretion. Discretion is hygiene. Discretion is the minimum. The first real rule is that you are not managing information. You are managing the distance between information and interpretation. The information often cannot be fully destroyed. There is always a witness, a server log somewhere you haven't reached, a memory in a person's head that no data forensics touches. What you are actually managing is the gap between that residual information and the moment it becomes a narrative that someone acts on. You are buying that gap, widening it.
making it so vast and so filled with noise that even if the information surfaces, it surfaces without context, without momentum, without the connective tissue that turns a fact into a story, that turns a story into a consequence. The tools for this are expensive, and they are not primarily digital. A newspaper editor in a mid-sized European city receives a consulting relationship through a foundation that receives its funding through a trust that your Dublin attorney administers. The editor doesn't know your name. The editor doesn't know that the foundation's interest in media independence, which is genuine, is also occasionally useful. The editor knows that the foundation is a supporter, and that supporters prefer not to see certain coverage. The editor has never been asked to kill a story. The editor has simply, over 4 years, learned which stories generate enthusiasm from the foundation and which generate silence. The editor has made professional decisions accordingly. This is not censorship. This is the economy of relationships. You tell yourself this when you think about it, which is less often than it used to be. A technology journalist in New York has a source. The source provides reliable, exclusive information about executive decisions at 3 major companies. The source is real. The information is accurate. The source is also an employee of a firm that you retain on a consulting basis, and the flow of exclusive tips is calibrated, not fabricated, calibrated. The journalist gets enough truth to trust the source completely. The source provides enough truth to maintain that trust. And once every 14 months or so, when a story is about to form that would damage a client, the source provides a counter-narrative. Not a false one, a different true thing that points in a different direction. The journalist chases the different true thing. The original story loses its momentum in the time it takes. By the time the journalist circles back, the moment has passed, and moments, you have learned, are everything. Facts without moments are just facts. Facts with moments are problems. The physical side of the work is its own education. Industrial-grade data destruction is not what most people picture. Most people picture a magnet or a hammer. That is not data destruction. That is theater. Real destruction, the kind that survives forensic recovery attempts by state-level actors, requires a process. A degausser rated for classified media, which you own, and which is registered to a company that provides IT asset disposal services to financial firms, which it does, because that's how you paid for it. Then, physical shredding in a Class 6 particle shredder that renders platters to fragments of less than 2 millimeters, which renders even electron microscopy recovery non-viable. Then incineration certificates, then chain of custody documentation that ends with a signed affidavit from the destruction facility. The facility is real. The affidavits are real. You have used the facility 41 times. You have a commercial relationship. They do not ask what was on the drives. You do not tell them. This arrangement suits everyone. The cost of a single physical destruction engagement, including transport, secure courier, facility fees, and your time, is approximately $22,000. Clients pay it without asking. At the level you work, $22,000 is not a number that requires discussion. It is a rounding error attached to a decision that could not afford to be a rounding error in any other direction. You know things. This is the part that doesn't have a clean operational description. By your mid-30s, working at this level across this many engagements, you have accumulated a knowledge base that is not cataloged anywhere, not in the air-gapped system, not anywhere. It lives only in your memory. You know which family's eldest son spent 8 months in a rehabilitation facility whose records you helped seal. You know which CEO's corporate expense account funded a relationship that lasted 4 years and ended with a structured settlement and a non-disclosure agreement whose existence you confirmed and whose terms you never saw, but whose size you inferred from the panic that preceded the phone call. You know which politicians' private communications contain a pattern that, assembled chronologically, tells a story about a decision that had a price attached to it. You did not assemble those communications, but you handled the cleanup of the environment in which they were sent, which meant you read enough to understand the shape of the thing, even if you never held the whole of it. You don't trade on this. This is important. Not morally important, strategically important. The moment you become a person who trades on what he knows, you become a different kind of threat, and different kinds of responses attract different kinds of responses. You have thought carefully about what kinds of responses are available to the people you work for. You have thought about this the way you think about everything, systematically, thoroughly, and without the comfort of telling anyone about the conclusions. You are very careful. You are also very alone. These are not unrelated.
At 47, your name does not appear in any search engine. This is not an accident. It is the most technically demanding project you have ever executed, and you executed it on yourself over the course of 6 years, incrementally, the way you would eat something very large, in pieces, starting from the edges. There are 3 people in the world who know your full legal name and can connect it to your face and your work. One is your attorney in Dublin, one is a former colleague from the Vienna firm who is now retired in a village in the Algarve and who you speak to once a year for approximately 20 minutes in a conversation that consists almost entirely of the absence of information. The third is a client. One client out of 214, a woman who hired you 11 years ago for work that required such a level of trust on both sides that the ordinary architecture of anonymity became a liability. She needed to know exactly who you were in order to entrust you with exactly what she needed to disappear. You needed to know exactly who she was for the same reason. That mutual exposure created something that is not friendship. It is closer to a treaty between small nations who share a border and have good reasons not to go to war. The cost of your own erasure was $2.3 million over 6 years, not all of it in direct expenditure, some of it in the form of work performed at reduced rates for entities that administered digital infrastructure in exchange for cooperative access to specific indexing pipelines. Some of it in relationships maintained with people at platforms that most people experience only as interfaces, but that are, underneath, machines operated by humans who have discretion and who occasionally exercise it. You did not bribe anyone. You are precise about this distinction in the part of your mind where precision still matters. You created conditions in which certain choices were easier than others, and the choices were made. And the outcome is that you do not exist in the places where existence is now measured. You live in 2 cities. You pay for both in cash, structured as lease arrangements through entities that are legitimate, audited, and entirely unremarkable. One city is in Central Europe, the other is in Southeast Asia. You spend approximately 5 months in each, and the remaining 2 months in transit or in a third location that changes. You are not hiding. Hiding implies there is someone looking. There is not, as far as you know, currently anyone looking, but you have arranged your life on the assumption that there might be, because the cost of being wrong about that assumption is not a cost you are willing to price. You work with 4 clients now, only 4. The rate is not something you publish because you do not publish anything, but if you did, the rate for a full structural engagement is $800,000. 2 of the 4 clients have been with you for more than 7 years. The other 2 are newer, referred through a channel so indirect that the chain of introduction has more than 5 steps, which is your minimum threshold for accepting new business. 5 steps means the person who recommended you has no relationship with the client themselves. It means your name traveled through at least 4 sets of hands before landing. It means you are not visible from where the client started. This is not paranoia. This is the logical extension of selling disappearance as a service. You cannot be findable. You cannot have a public-facing reputation. Your reputation exists entirely in a stratum of society where reputation travels without records. You are known the way certain restaurants are known in certain cities, by exactly the people who need to know, and by no one else, and the no one else is the point. The irony has stopped being interesting and started being the weather. You know things about the people you have worked for that they believe are known only to themselves. You know things about institutions that those institutions have spent considerable resources to keep unknowable. You have held at various points in the last 2 decades information that would have materially altered public understanding of specific events that shaped markets, careers, elections in 2 countries. You didn't hold this information in any stored form. It passed through you the way water passes through a pipe. You were the infrastructure, not the archive.
But the residue of that passage is in you, in the way that being a pipe eventually means you carry the mineral trace of everything that moved through you. You don't think about legacy. Legacy requires a name attached to it, and you are working very hard on the name. You don't think about consequence in the way that implies you believe there is an accounting coming. You have processed too many engagements on behalf of people for whom the accounting never came to believe in the accounting. What you think about on the nights when you are in Central Europe with the window open and the city doing what cities do when they think no one important is watching is simpler and harder than legacy or consequence. You think about the 23-year-old in Frankfurt, not a specific one, the category, the one who just opened their laptop in a hotel room and made a decision that felt entirely private, entirely contained, entirely manageable in the moment. They don't know yet that the moment is never contained. They don't know that the digital world is a place that charges admission on the way out, not the way in. They don't know that there is a person like you, or rather that there is a system that a person like you has made themselves a node in that exists specifically because their sense of privacy is a product they were sold but never owned. You could feel something about it. You have noticed that the equipment for feeling something about it has not entirely atrophied. It still registers. You simply learned to treat registration as information rather than instruction. The signal is there. You don't act on it. Acting on it would require a kind of self that your work has progressively, professionally, necessarily made unavailable. You made this trade knowingly. That's what you tell yourself on the nights when the signal registers most clearly. Knowingly. Your phone is on the table. It is a device that exists for 7 days and then destroyed by a process you could describe in considerable technical detail. It will ring before morning. It always does at this level. Someone somewhere has just become afraid. The fear will have a specific digital shape. The shape will require a specific kind of attention. You will provide the attention. The fear will subside. The footprint will shrink. The world will continue in the direction it was already going, minus one fact that will now be permanently, professionally, irrecoverably gone. You are very good at this. You are, in the most precise sense of the word, invisible. And visibility, you have learned across 47 years of living inside a life that does not appear in any record, is not something that disappears all at once. It disappears the way everything real disappears. Slowly, then completely, then without a trace, until the only proof it ever existed is the shape of the space where it used to be. And you have spent your entire career making sure that even the shape doesn't show. The phone rings. You answer. The market opens.